Welcome to today's webinar. We will be discussing payment terms and deposit invoices. The concept that we want to go over today is the ability to create different terms. Sometimes terms have deposit functionalities in there. Sometimes there are just what we call grace period, meaning you pay afterwards. Sometimes these actually combine both the two, where you may ask for a certain amount up front and a certain amount will be paid after the fact. So we'll be going over the creation of these payment terms and then the configuration of whether these terms should include percentages. We'll be going over creating default terms for specific customers, and then we'll be going over creating those quotes and sending out those deposit invoices. We're going to start off with the payment terms. Under system settings, payment terms, we have some very defaulted system terms. And to create a new term, we would hit new payment term. We can give this a name, as an example, 50% deposit, 50% net 30, as an example. That would be the name that would appear on the drop down. Let's see. Now, the grace period would be however long you want it to go back after the fact. So if we want to say they have 30 days after the fact, that would be when the due date of the whole job is. The deposit percentage is how much of a percentage they need to pay towards the deposit. And we can put 50%. And the due date period is how long prior to the start should this be due. So if we wanted this paid, say 10 days before the start date, that would be the due date period. We'll hit create. And so now we have this new term that we created. So this is after the fact of what is the grace period after it, how much a deposit percentage should be, and if there should be however many days prior to the start date should that due date or that deposit be due. With that, we can go to projects, project elements, and we're going to change a couple settings here. Under accounting options, we will want to add that new term for our quotes. You can also add a default payment term if you'd like. Other things that you can do under field settings is if you're using percentages for deposits, first of all, make sure a deposit field is inherited or is enabled. It can be inherited if you have a term for a parent financial document. Make sure the deposit percentage field is enabled and the deposit due date is enabled also. And we'll hit update. Under contacts, contact manager, we have a person here, Lisa Fossler, and under her terms and notes, we can do her standard terms might be 50-50. So now when we do a quote, we'll start new quote, test, deposit, and let's say we are starting on the 30th. And this is going to July 1st. And we found Lisa Fossler here. And we'll hit accept. So because we chose Lisa Fossler, it automatically brought in her terms of 50% deposit, 50% net 30. If I drag in a simple Sure SM58 with the price of $10, Let's go back and look at our header area. And you'll notice that the deposit automatically filled in at 50% or $5. If we run our deposit invoice, this is simply a report that we have generated because most of the times you are just asking for money up front. You will invoice them after the fact. This is just a simple deposit request. So this shows Lisa Fossler. You're requiring a 50% deposit. Notice that the due date is 10 days prior to the ship date, and that was in the terms. If we go back to our terms, we said that we want this 10 days before the ship date. So that's why this deposit due date is filled in 10 days prior to the ship date. Here's your total. Here's the deposit due, $10 in rental, subtotal, etc. And this order requires a deposit of $5, and please remit $5 by 6/20/2015. So that's a very simple example of creating a term. Grace period is however many days after you want it to be due. If you want a percentage prior for a deposit, and how time quantities, how much prior to the ship date you would like that payment for the deposit made. Second thing we did as a reminder was we opened up our quotes and we added that new term to the accepted terms under the accounting options. Under field settings, we also want to make sure that we have deposit field enabled, the deposit percentage enabled, and the deposit due date field enabled. Last thing we did is you can create standard terms for contacts. And once we created that quote for that contact, it automatically filled in the terms and we printed out the report for the deposit invoice and sent that. So if we want to record that payment, we could go to our payments tab, hit create new payment. And let's say they sent us cash of $5. And if we go to our total section, there's our subtotal, our total, our applied payment, and our balance still due. If we were to generate this invoice, the payment would then be applied to the invoice also, and we could receive a secondary payment to that invoice for the final amount. So that is a quick overview of configuring payment terms, configuring those terms for the associated financial document, associating the payment term for a contact, and processing that through. If you have any questions, please contact support@flexrentalsolutions.com.